Here we are back at the beginning with A World at War. We've done a translation. I've spent about a week on this from the Gathering Storm game over to the European situation in A World at War. Some of it was the paperwork simply translating over to here. Then I had to move that into, say, the research charts for here, as well as actually set up the pieces. It shouldn't have taken so long. One thing that made it much harder to face more than anything else is, the simple fact of these little sheets that I'm using, and I guess these are optional, but there's no real explanation of how to use the handwritten version or the written version of this. There's basically a written chart for this, but it doesn't handle the ship construction properly. It would involve many sheets of paper to capture the information that I've got placed out on the table like this. So I'm going with the version that's closer to the old style of Third Reich and Advanced Third Reich. This introduction is kind of going to be an interesting thing. It's the introduction to the whole shebang, but I've done a military ground game introduction already, which isn't too bad. I did a naval introduction, which is terrible. Go watch the Coral Sea playthrough instead. I don't feel like touching that again. And to tell you the truth, I don't really feel like going too much into the rules, maybe not at all. We'll see how I feel for A World at War, for the diplomatic and technological aspects. I'll probably gloss them slightly, but the truth of the matter is, so much of it is individual special cases, both for diplomacy, where each country has its own little chart, and for technology, where each technology has its own little chart. But they also have their own little rules of how they're handled. So, for example, if you want to use technology to build up your force pool, you use a different kind of technological spending than you do if you're researching stuff. You use the same points for both, but they're handled very differently. A couple of things to, again, this is really probably the best of the intros in the sense that I don't plan on going into any detail. The more you dig into this game, the harder it is to explain, to cope with. The only way to really get a grasp on it is to play it and make mistakes, and that's what we're going to do. Over here, these little hex tiles are from Gathering Storm. They indicate that I've extended both the Maginot Line and the West Wall beyond their historical parameters. I'm not sure how much the West Wall being out there is really useful until, say, an invasion of France happens, but that's what we've got. There were some... So, largely, I don't really desire to put the West Wall into place, especially. Growing the Maginot was one of my plans initially, but the truth of the matter was, within Gathering Storm, it was making a lot of sense to build the West Wall. So it happened, and it's not like it's a useless thing. Some of the other technologies I'm beginning to see when I translate it over, wow, I'm not as far ahead as I think I should be in spring of 41, which is actually where we are here, but I've got the marker in fall of 39 because I've got to catch up in the Pacific. Because Gathering Storm doesn't handle the Pacific, that's what we're going to be focusing on largely at the beginning of the game. And there's not going to be a hell of a lot there. Now, okay, right, to the setup. Why was it such a pain in the ass? Well, because these charts are not all available for the Global War Campaign game. So I've got Russia and Germany here for Global War Campaign. Here I've got European Theater because Italy's on the back of one of these others. That's probably okay, but what I found was when you go over here, now I had both a Pacific and European from the Global War, but in order to fit the naval charts on this little sideboard here, and I've got the other ones down here on this little minor table, I cleaned the one up because the Pacific Theater campaign game, oddly enough, contains the shipbuilding charts for both theaters, which makes little sense to me, but whatever. But, for example, with the Japanese, I only have the Pacific Theater campaign game, which, strangely enough, doesn't give any instructions here. Those instructions are given over here in these boxes. You have to kind of get used to the way they work, because this is your allowable build section, but it actually includes the units you're supposed to have on the board. Now over in Europe, I know what units I'm supposed to have on the board. Well, I had to tweak the numbers a little bit. I believe there are some mistakes. There's an indication that there's a rewrite, living rules type version of the translation, but you know, I don't want to print out a living rules, and I'm really not that interested in even if there was a change log in fixing it all. I think that something like that is essentially flawed in general, and you know, close is good enough. Essentially, I've designed a certain, you know, situation by playing Gathering Storm, and I more or less captured it. I maybe a few BRPs off in terms of units that are available. I got some Italian ships I didn't include in my task force for some reason. They're subs. It's kind of strange to put them in the task force, but I'm doing that just to prevent clutter, I guess. One other thing that's kind of different is there's this little map insert. Now, there's a big hunk of map insert that you can throw over all of Central Europe. Since the only thing that I had that was different from the historical in terms of this is Croatia and Serbia exist. Croatia is, I don't know. I don't know if it's a normal country or not. It's claimed to be a client state of Italy. I haven't looked up enough to really understand it. It is essentially a minor country, though. Now, Greece is part of Italy, which is why you see Italian troops down there. Serbia is essentially a very allied, aligned country. And you'll see the coloring's a little different. I don't know if the original is that different, but the coloring from my printer came out that. And I've got it kind of stuck down with some post-it notes. Okay. One interesting thing in the setup here, I've got Chinese partisans sitting over here in territory that's not within the Chinese territory itself. Now, the reason for that is, from what I can read from the partisan rules and the order of setup, the partisan rules say you can put things where you like within the territory they can operate in, which includes China. And the Japanese set up after the Chinese in the normal order of setup. This would be in a World at War question to ask. I don't know if it's reasonable or not. These aren't going to last very long. And, you know, we're in fall of 39, so we'll be hitting the YSS pretty soon. But it does give me more of a line along the river line. I'm not going to be able to hold much of China. You can see I've pulled back. I'm not like trying to defend everywhere, just because, you know, frankly, if the Japanese try hard at all, they should be able to bust me out of that clear terrain. On the other hand, I might be counting on them using nothing but attrition combat, and I may change that setup as I look at the rules, just on the thought of, well, if the Japanese more or less have to use attrition combat, I don't really care too much. I don't remember how that works. They may be in some sort of limited war as they are in World in Flames. Okay. Well, what big sections of this rule book that I can't really access to talk to you about? Although I've gotten rougher with it, I'll tell you, and it hasn't fallen apart yet, but it doesn't show any signs of lasting long. If I get a play out of it for my $150, whatever, right? I don't know. So the big sections we want to worry about here, logistics we've largely done. Oh, by the way, there's one interesting thing in the setup. There's these bridgeheads in the two Japanese cities that landed. As far as I'm concerned, by the rules, they're going to disappear immediately. But what they do allow is for you to put too many units in those spaces for the first turn of the game. So if the Chinese don't set up with a good, strong defensive perimeter, you can throw extra units in so that you can widen your perimeter more easily. That's the only effect I can see to them. All right. So let's go Go look for 35, I guess, the economics. I think we've scratched on economics in the land game. I know it existed there. It's so hard to tell what I've talked to you about and what I haven't. I'm just not sure. So one of the concepts we have is the mobilizations. That carries on through Gathering Storm. So for example, Germany has a mobilization left. So they can up their income, their BRP base, and get some additional troops. I have the troops that are coming in from Gathering Storm, because not everything, things were mobilized late there. I probably should put this over here in the Spring of 41 turn, just to remind me of when I start playing this game as well. Anything else I want to deal with? So we again start having things like the Murmansk convoys and stuff, and this is the problem. This whole game is just filled with all these special rules, as opposed to WIF, which has this, if you can trace, a route with transports getting to some place, you can transport the goods that you need to get there. Here though, we've got this whole special set of rules for Murmansk, and it's off map, but, it's got its own little boxes where you start hunting each other, and until that becomes an effect, I'm not even going to bother looking it up. And that's really the problem, is that I will never have a gestalt understanding of this game because of how I play, right? There's just too much here to really understand the whole flow of the game. I think Murmansk was something that I very seldomly used when I played the original Third Reich, and then Advanced Third Reich I played probably even less, although I don't know, because I didn't have Third Reich for all that long before it disappeared. Anyway, so essentially research and diplomacy both work along similar lines. You get a certain base amount of points of these for free. Then you get some points generated from your BRP base. And then maybe you can buy some. Doesn't look like it. Now with the research, I'm using these charts rather than the newer ones. The reason Global Gathering Storm comes with research charts is there are some fixed elements to these original ones that are no longer applicable. So it's not like they were actually making anything any better. They were just fitting it to the, hey, you might be at a different place. I was able to annotate that on this, so you've got a huge set of spreadsheets here, and I've kept these in the booklet. I feel like having them bound will help me keep things together. I've also got the diplomatic record sheet here. Now this is also something that needs some upgrading. So for example, I've got Croatia and Serbia listed on their own lines here. I don't know what the intelligence line is for even. Not unlike Gathering Storm, a World at War doesn't really tell you how to use the charts, and maybe it can't because there's so damn many of them. They are almost of a nature of, hey, some dude made these player aids and they'll help you implement the rules. More than anything else, and there's very little support for them. But at the very least, these I can write on. Yeah, you can say you're destroying the game. Yeah, well, I'd rather write on this paper than print up new paper, and I don't. They'll erase. It's like I've tore these out, right? It's meant to be used this way, as far as I'm concerned. I'm writing very lightly. I'll photocopy if I ever play with other people. So generally, most of the research point situations are not well covered here. Yeah, the old Advanced Third Reich, the research was handled with charts. I don't know quite where it's handled here, but essentially you have a number you have to reach, and that has an effect. And then I don't know if you look it up to see what the effects are in here. It gives you a less integrated place to find it, but it allows them to express it a little bit more cheaply. The other thing that you can do is you can add to your force pool, and that's done I think with these where you have a cost per unit that you're adding or something. But that doesn't make sense with everything, does it? So, you know. I guess we'll figure it out as we go, because I'm just in no mood to go through these rules again. I thought I vaguely understood things before, and I've just cracked into them too many times, and the best way is just to keep going. We have some in place, and this is totally fucking useless to give this intro, right? Diplomacy is the same way. Throw a rock at the rule book, it'll behave better. I guess what I have, and again, these are guesses because I can't fucking be bothered to look at the rules again until I need them. So I guess what I've got here is in parentheses in 1940, since we're in 41, got values that are base values that this country is at. And I don't know if those are just modifiers to the die roller, or that's the base that I'm at. I'll have to look that up too and figure it out. And then this is just fun. This is why I'm not playing, right? Because I'm in no condition to cope with giving the intro. And I'm really not in too much condition to start this thing. It's just, it's so anathema to me. There's just so much that I've read the rules, I've gone through them 3 or 4 times, I've fiddled with them at other times, and it's all gone now, right? Because of Gathering Storm, because of whatever, and I gotta fight my way through it again, and it's just so disheartening to face something like this. Alright, so screw it. You know what? I'm not going to tell you the rules. Because that's how I used to do things. I didn't tell the rules, and I think they worked better. And it's not like me reading the rules to you is any damn help anyway. So what we're going to do here is what I'm used to doing with games. I'm going to have a vague idea of the rules, I'm going to push into them, and I'm going to play. And the hell with these intros, right? I don't know if I'm going to give them for other games, but it just doesn't serve any purpose here. You're not going to learn the game from me trying to work my way through the rules, and all you're going to see is me getting frustrated. Will I get frustrated anyway? Yeah, hell yeah. You know, I mean, trying to cope with this thing, especially with that fucking rule book, is hell anyway. All right, let's send this up. You know, I don't know. All right.